Burpees are an amazing full body exercise that I think everyone should incorporate into their routine. And that's why I'm bringing burpees back in this video, and we're gonna talk about tips to make sure you're using proper form. My first tip for you is to always remember that a burpee is called a squat thrust. That's another name for it. And it's called that because essentially what a burpee is it's a deep squat and then you kick out into a plank or a push-up or something like that. But you're thrusting out at the bottom of a squat. So that's why it's called a squat thrust. And I think a lot of people forget that. And a common issue that I see way too often is that people, instead of initiating the burpee with a squat, they initiate it with a hinge, almost like a deadlift or good morning kind of movement. And they just sort of hinge at the hips, placing their hands on the floor and then kicking out into a burpee. So don't make that mistake, all right? Make sure that you remind yourself this is a squat thrust, so you should be squatting. If you need some help with this tip, here's what I recommend doing. Stand with your feet about shoulder width apart. That's a good distance because we're gonna be placing our hands between our feet instead of outside of our feet. And then place your hands into like a prayer pose kind of thing right in front of your chest. And as you squat down with your hands in that prayer pose, squat as far down as you comfortably can, and hopefully you can touch your elbows to your knees. At that point in the squat, that's a good point to fold forward and place your hands on the floor, and then pivot on the arms and kick out into that plank. Keeping the tension in the upper body, then you want to kick back into the deep squat and stand up. So as you can see, when you do this properly, when you squat and then place your hands on the floor and then kick out, you get a lot more from it in terms of improving your hip mobility and your deep squat mobility. And I think that's a factor that a lot of people miss out on. By the way, the reason why you want to put your hands between your feet instead of outside of your feet is that you might notice when you place your hands outside your feet in the burpee, your upper arms are gonna sort of bump into your knees and your thighs, and it just gets really annoying. So it's better to place your hands between your feet. Now, the topic of people hinging instead of squatting to get down in their burpee reminds me of sprawling. I want to mention sprawling. So that's another tactic that people use. They sprawl into their burpees, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sprawl is a move from martial arts, and it's really explosive. It's a great way to make your burpees more explosive. But what I don't like about it is that some people are using the sprawl to sort of avoid that deep squat. So if that's you, maybe be honest with yourself and start with the easiest progression of burpees, which is to simply squat down and then step out into a plank and then step back in. And just work on that deep squat the best you can. We all can use improvement in our squat, myself included. I'm no exception to that. So I'm just recommending what I recommend to myself, right? We don't wanna cheat on these exercises. And I think sometimes people sprawl because they're kind of cheating. They're like, well, I don't do the squat great, so I'm just gonna do these, by exploding into a sprawling movement, and it looks really cool and I get my heart rate up. And that's great, but maybe work on that squat too. In terms of variations, I actually have an entire burpee video dedicated to the different variations or progressions, so you can start off very simple and gradually work your way up to explosive burpees. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will put one of those things up here on the screen. And also, this next tip kind of goes in line with everything else I've mentioned, but focus on quality over quantity. Burpee is one of those exercises that we tend to use for cardio. It gets your heart rate way up. It's a good HIIT exercise, right? And that's great, I totally agree. But I also think it's important that you focus on form. It's good to, maybe instead of counting your reps, set a timer. Say I'm gonna do burpees for 1 minute or 2 minutes, and choose a progression that you can do within that time frame, and just focus on good quality movements. Remember to squat down before you place your hands on the floor. Kick out, really lock out that plank. And if you're doing a push-up, really focus on a good quality push-up at the bottom. You might find, at least what I have found, is that when you focus on those quality reps, you actually get more out of it. Your heart rate will still get way up there, but you get more in terms of just overall body tension, and you improve mobility too. All right, everybody, if you haven't been doing burpees, or maybe you have, but you've been doing them kind of sloppy, hopefully these tips help you out. All right, don't forget to hit like for me if I did help you, and make sure you subscribe and stay tuned if you want to learn more from me. I'll be talking about burpees and showing all kinds of other different types of bodyweight fitness here on the channel. So until then, make sure you work on those burpees.